The Victorian era was a time of big changes in Britain. Cities grew fast, factories popped up everywhere, and new inventions like trains and telephones changed daily life. But while the rich lived in comfort, the poor often suffered in dirty, crowded slums. Children had to work hard jobs and diseases spread easily because medicine was still very basic. Along with that, there were many different foods at that time. In today's video, I will tell you what Victorian people ate. But before we start, if you are new to the channel, please subscribe and press the bell icon. Thank you. In Victorian times, breakfast for the upper class was more than just a meal. It was a daily ritual, a display of wealth, refinement, and domestic order. Serving late in the morning, often between 8 and 10 am, it unfolded in grand dining rooms beneath chandeliers with silver cutlery, fine china, and starched white lines. The spread was lavish and abundant. There were platters of cold meats, ham, tongue, even game leftovers from the previous night's dinner, neatly arranged beside boiled or poached eggs, fresh baked bread or toast, butter, and ever-present marmalade. Kiplers were others more. Fish might appear along with pastries, fruit preserves, and seasonal fruits. Porridge or gruel was still common, but mostly among those clinging to older traditions or for the younger children. And of course, no breakfast table was complete without a pot of strong tea, often served with milk and sugar, or occasionally coffee for those with continental taste. For the wealthy, this meal was a chance to begin the day with formality and civility, sometimes joined by family, guests, or visiting dignitaries. It was unhurried, part of a larger performance of upper-class life, where even the first meal of the day reaffirmed one's social status. For the poor in Victorian England, breakfast was a far cry from the grand rituals of the upper class. It was simple, sparse, and dictated entirely by necessity. A typical morning meal might consist of nothing more than a hunk of stale bread, often soaked in weak tea or even just plain hot water to soften it. If they were lucky, they might have a smear of dripping, the congealed fat saved from cooking meat, to give the bread some flavor and calories. Porridge made from oats or barley, when available, was another common option, especially in workhouses or among rural labourers. But it was typically served plain, without milk or sugar. There were no eggs, no meat, no food preservers. For many working families, breakfast was just about getting something, anything, into the stomach before a long day of labour. Hunger was common, and meals were more about survival than sustenance. In Victorian cities, especially in places like London, street food was a lifeline for the working class. With long hours and little money, many labourers and factory workers couldn't afford home-cooked meals. Instead, they turned to the bustling streets where vendors sold quick, cheap, and filling food to keep people going through the day. Meat pies, hot flaky and stuffed with minced meat or offal, were a popular choice, easy to eat on the go. Another favorite was jelly deals, a dish made from chopped eels, boiled in spice stock and left to cool into a jelly. It might sound strange now, but it was affordable, high in protein, and a staple in the East End of London. Hot potatoes, often baked or roasted with their skins on, were another street food standby, simple, warm, and hearty, sometimes sold with a pinch of salt or a dab of butter, if one could afford it. Fried fish, especially when paired with bread or later with chips, became a beloved and enduring part of British food culture. In Victorian times, food wasn't just scarce for the poor. It was often dangerous. With few regulations in place and profit the main priority for many sellers, food adulteration was shockingly common. Unscrupulous vendors routinely tampered with basic food items to make them look better, last longer, and weight more, regardless of the health risk. Milk, for example, was often watered down and then mixed with chalk or plaster of Paris to restore its white color. Pickles and sweets were sometimes brightened with copper salts, giving them a vivid green hue, but also poisoning those who ate them. Sugar, flour, and even tea leaves were padded with fillers like chalk dust, sand, ground, bones, or even brick dust. Paper might contain powder, nuts, and beer could be laced to its cinnamon to make it taste stronger. There were virtually no laws or oversight to protect consumers, and the public often had no idea what they were consuming. It wasn't until a series of scandals and growing pressure from health campaigners that the government began introducing basic food safety laws in the late 19th century. But for much of the Victorian era, eating in the city could literally be a life-threatening gamble. The Sunday roast was more than just a meal in Victorian Britain. It was a cherished tradition that brought families together, rich and poor alike. For the working class, it was often the only proper, hearty meal of the entire week, a moment of warmth and toughness after 6 days of hard labor and merger food. Families would save up what little they had to buy a small joint of beef, pork, or mutton, sometimes pooling resources or relying on communal baking ovens in poorer neighborhoods. These ovens, run by local bakers, allowed families without proper stove to bring their meat and vegetables, usually potatoes, carrots, and onions, to be roasted on Sunday morning and picked up in time for lunch. For the upper classes, the Sunday roast was a grand affair, served in the elegant dining rooms with an abundance of sides, sauces, and servants. But even for the poorest families, it was a ritual of dignity, a rare chance to eat meat and gather around the table together. Leftovers, if there were any, would stretch into the coming days, turn into soups, stews, or sandwiches. In Victorian Britain, meat was a powerful marker of class. For the wealthy, it was abundant and varied. Beef joints, roasted pork, venison, rabbit, and all kinds of game filled their tables. Elaborate roasts were centerpieces of meals, often surrounded by rich sauces, vegetables, and pasties. Servants prepared and presented these dishes with care, reinforcing the household status and refinement. For the poor, however, meat was a real luxury. Most working-class families couldn't afford prime cuts. Instead, they made do with scalps, bones, or offal, the organs and leftover parts the rich didn't want. Tripe, liver, lungs, and the heart were common among the urban poor, cooked slowly into stews to soften their texture and make them go further. Sometimes dripping, which is animal fat from butcher shops, was the closest they got to meat. In many households, especially during hard times, there was no meat at all, and meals relied on bread, potatoes, and tea. The difference in meat consumption wasn't just about taste, it reflected deep economic divisions shaping health, nutrition, and daily life across Victorian society. So far today, I hope you have understood what people of that time ate. Comment below and let me know which era food you would like to know about next. See you in another new video. Thank you for watching.